Hey folks, I'm Mike, and this is a mini review of the Team Black Sheep Mr. Steele motors. Now, it's kind of a long story, but I ended up with a complete set plus one of Mr. Steele's motors. I wasn't sure if I was going to keep them. I used them for a hype train. Thought about returning them, thought long and hard about returning them, specifically because they are super expensive. They run $32 to $35, and I wasn't really sure if that's what I wanted to run. I've been running the Emax RSSs. These are 2300 kV, and they were running really well for me. My biggest complaint was that the props backed out, the nuts back off quite frequently, but that's not such a huge deal. You just tighten it down, whatever. So today I said, you know what, let me try out these Mr. Steele motors. I had done some research, and one of the things that I had seen on the this one website is that they have a linear throttle response, meaning that if you give 1 volt, you get a linear response from 1 volt all the way up to 16 volt. And that seemed really interesting to me, specifically because with the Emax RSSs, the one thing I had noticed is that they're really kind of weak on the low end. You kind of go from 0 to mid pretty quickly, and that's where you have to stay. So I mounted the Mr. Steele motors. Now they're this pretty white color, which will be completely dirty in just a little bit. But if you look, probably the biggest difference is if you watch the RSS, you can kind of see that it's really clicky. And most of the motors out today have these super strong magnet grips, and I've always associated that with that's a good solid motor. The Mr. Steele motors are not as grippy. They actually spin a lot easier and freer than the RSSs did. And I thought, well, let's give them a shot. The worst case scenario, I fly them for a few packs. I don't like them. I sell them for 20 bucks a piece, and away we go. So I took them out today, and I was kind of shocked. I was shocked because, number one, I had a lot more low-end throttle, and I think I attribute that, or low-end response, I attribute that to the fact that they're 2306s. As opposed to 2205s. That probably helps, and I'm using the Cyclone props, so they're a little bit heavier props. But the top end was just as responsive as the low end, and the mid was just fine. So it really did feel like a linear throttle response, which is not something I've ever flown with. I actually kind of enjoyed it. Now I will say this: they were definitely more motor than I'm used to. I ended up a lot higher, and it was more quote-unquote floaty than I'm used to, specifically because I think they're also 2450 kV, so I haven't run high kVs in quite a while. And I would find myself way higher than I expected off of the same type of muscle memory punch from the RSSs. The only downside that I've heard from some experienced pilots like Drew Camden and a few other folks are that besides just being ridiculously expensive, and also, let's admit it, everybody kind of hates on Steele. All that aside, they seem to be fragile. The way that the bell is constructed, I can kind of see that it would be fragile. This bell is going to bend easier right here on these support sections right there, specifically because it's wider and thinner. Than on something like, here's your RSSs, and I mean those are tight and they're actually very thick. So I can see that if you really just ding something pretty hard, you're probably going to be out of bell. I don't know what the situation is in terms of replacement parts. I don't know if they're hard to get a hold of. One thing I will say that I really appreciate over the RSSs is that they use E-clamps as opposed to screws. I'm not a big fan of the screws. I don't think that's a good design. I've already had several back out on me for various reasons. However, in my not so vast flight experience, I will say that I like the Mr. Steele motors. Time will tell, and we will see what ends up happening if I keep them. Talk to you later.